Major support for Dr. Norman C. Francis, A Legacy of Leadership, was provided in association with Just Films, Ford Foundation, supporting documentary film, public media, and freedom of expression to tell the stories that reflect the diverse perspectives and experiences of our world today. The Ford Foundation. Learn more.
Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Louisiana. The strength of the cross, the protection of the shield, and thousands of Louisiana doctors. The right card, the right care.
Liberty Bank, celebrating 50 years of building generational wealth. Mortgages, business loans, Visa credit, financial freedom. Mr. and Mrs. Charles W. Goodyear, proud supporters of quality educational television in New Orleans. Additional funding comes from Dillard University, cultivating leaders who act courageously to make the world a better place. Loyola University New Orleans, proud to sponsor this documentary about the incredible legacy of Norman Francis, the first Black graduate of Loyola College of Law, and an embodiment of our commitment to education, justice, and service to the community. New South Parking, proudly honoring the legacy of a true leader, Dr. Norman C. Francis. Operation Restoration supports women and girls impacted by incarceration to recognize their full potential, restore their lives, and discover new possibilities. Velo Charitable Trust, supporting this documentary with love and admiration from Angela Velo and Jim Basker. Xavier University of Louisiana, whose ultimate purpose is to contribute to the promotion of a more just and humane society by preparing its students to assume roles of leadership and service in a global society. And by Delgado Community College, serving the New Orleans region since 1921. And Tulane, sparking innovation, pioneering research, transforming teaching, opportunity, and diversity. And from these additional contributors, and by the WYES Producer Circle, a group of generous contributors dedicated to the support of WYES local productions.
He's always been a shining light in this city. He's the kind of man that every city needs. Thank God we've had him.
He embodies all of it, strategically, logically, rationally, how to deal with difficult situations.
I always knew Norman Francis was desperate for something big because he was smart. He was courageous.
Norman Francis represents all that is good about bringing people together, caring about people across racial lines.
If you want to understand a life well spent and making a difference in the world, Norman Francis is a man you ought to look at. How he grew up, where he grew up, what he made of his own life, but most importantly, what he did for others.
I think his instincts, his skill set, his ability to lead really places him in a category of being one of America's greatest contemporary leaders.
Dr. Norman Christopher Francis never made a distinction between higher learning and a higher calling. For almost half a century, he blended academics and faith at Xavier University in New Orleans, the only Catholic institution among America's historically Black colleges and universities. A saying etched into one of the campus buildings captures Dr. Francis' understanding of God's role in the founding, sustainment, and success of the university.
It said, God's greatest work on earth is man, and man's master art is leading men to God. Wow, that's powerful.
By the time he retired in 2015, Dr. Francis had been Xavier's president for 47 years. It is one of the longest tenures for a sitting university president in U.S. history.
Well, to be honest, he's a superstar in higher education.
His impact may have been rooted at Xavier, but Norman Francis branched out, influencing many aspects of New Orleans and beyond.
His contributions to the community are wide-ranging. It was the centrality of his presidency at Xavier University, but founding chair of Liberty Bank, first African-American on the City Civil Service Commission, an investor in the Saints, and someone who moved as freely amongst New Orleans business community as he did amongst various parts of this community.
When it came time to rebuild Louisiana after one of the most devastating disasters in U.S. history, the state turned to Norman Francis to help lead the recovery.
I don't think there's anybody who probably knows the state as well as he does, has the respect and honor that he has. So if he says something, you listen.
Today, Norman C. Francis Parkway runs from the Bayou St. John area of New Orleans to the city's Fontainebleau neighborhood. The street connects many communities. The same could be said of the man for which it is named. He has hosted the Pope and been an advisor to 8 American presidents. These are the highlights of a storied life with humble beginnings.
I was born 1931 in Lafayette, Louisiana. I never thought I was poor. Under any standard you would rule, yes, I was poor. My khakis were always pressed and clean. I had a pea jacket from the Navy that I got from the Navy store after World War II. No, and my dad never owned an automobile.
He's one of 5 siblings, lived in a small house in Lafayette where they raised chickens in the backyard. So he had to take care of the chickens, had to pick the eggs.
Francis' father, Joseph, worked as a bellhop at a local hotel in Lafayette called the Evangeline. His mother, Mabel, was a homemaker. Providing for their 5 children was difficult, but Joseph Francis kept busy.
He became an entrepreneur. He became a barber. He owned his own barbershop, and that was the central part of where people met, you know. I learned to play checkers in the barbershop.
And at the barbershop, he spent many hours there playing checkers and listening to the older gentlemen tell stories. And I think that being connected to the community in that way helped him in terms of his humility and his understanding of people.
At home, his Catholic parents emphasized prayer every night.
We had what was called deep faith, certainly hope and charity.
Having had limited schooling of their own, Joseph and Mabel Francis made education a priority for their children.
He grew up with 2 parents, and as he always said, who really only had a 3rd grade education, but taught him everything he needed to know in life, and that is having faith in God, being kind, and also getting a solid education.
Around the age of 6, while living in the segregated South, the future university president learned one of his most important life lessons.
I was standing on the back porch with my mother, and I saw my dad with other men around the neighborhood. There were about 5, and they were building this box. And I said, Mama, what are they doing, building this box? Oh, they said, you know your little friend who was white? Down the street, you play ball with him with the other kids? Yeah. He said, his daddy died, your mother didn't have money, so those men got together and built a coffin. That never left me, And they said they're gonna take care of whatever they could. So that religious part of understanding human beings, appreciating what they are, color didn't matter, you know, you were human.
When he entered Catholic school, his mother's wisdom became a moral compass, which Francis used to navigate the reality of the times.
Her first thing was, remember, I'm in a segregated system. Okay, don't worry about that. You worry about what you and how you're going to treat people, no matter who they are, how you're going to respect yourself and the like. And don't be telling people what you think they ought to know. You know, you respect them, you expect them.
He did not grow up in easy times. He tells stories of being chased, but he pushed through and he knew who he was.
In 1948, Norman Francis graduated as valedictorian of St. Paul's High School in Lafayette. A Catholic nun saw his potential and helped him earn a work scholarship to Xavier University. His next stop would be New Orleans.
I remember he tells a story about when he was, I don't know, maybe 16 or 17 years old. Our grandfather put him on a segregated rail car, and at the time it was in the baggage part. No money in his pocket, put him on the train, sent him to New Orleans where he didn't know anybody. He was fortunate enough because of the connection between the nuns. I think a nun, maybe it was at Holy Rosary, called and said, we have this kid who's really smart and talented. Do you have a place for him? They said, just send him. And that's just what they did.
It would change the course of Francis's life and Xavier University. Once on campus, he stood out among his classmates, even as a freshman.
Norman Francis was an excellent student. Everyone knew that. He was what we called a bookworm.
It seemed fitting his work scholarship placed him in the university's library, where he started out repairing damaged books. By his senior year, Francis moved his way up to night supervisor of library services. He also climbed several other ladders at the university.
Norman did stand out because he was a freshman class president, he was sophomore class president, he was junior class president, and then he was Student Government Association president. We knew that Norman Francis was a leader. He was our leader, and he was a good student. And we had no idea, what was going to happen in the future, but we knew he was destined for something because he had all of the qualities of a leader.
In 1952, Francis graduated from Xavier with a bachelor's degree in mathematics. At the age of 21, he set his sights on another goal and another institution in New Orleans, the law school at Loyola University. His enrollment at the law school would be groundbreaking since Jim Crow laws had kept the South mired in segregation decades after Reconstruction.
In that period of Reconstruction, you had African Americans who were going to the East, going to schools, not in the South. I was the first black at Loyola's law school, and that's 1955.
Francis broke barriers, but was barred from staying in Loyola's dormitory. So he was given room and board at Xavier in exchange for serving as a hall monitor in a freshman dorm. One of his law school classmates, Moon Landrieu, would later become the mayor of New Orleans. Landrieu says Francis opened his eyes to new perspectives.
I'd liked him from the moment I met him, and I saw for the first time a black who was smarter than I was, better looking and better mannered than I was. It was a real opening for me to understand more about this racial issue than I did as a kid coming up.
Francis earned his law degree, graduating Loyola Law School with honors in 1955. Not long after, he married Blanche McDonald. They had met on Xavier's campus, where Blanche, a Xavier graduate, was working as a modern dance instructor. The newlyweds didn't have much time for a honeymoon. 2 weeks later, Francis was drafted by the U.S. Army.
The Army didn't know I was a lawyer when they drafted me until they met me on the grounds and say, we've been looking at the records, say, you're a lawyer. Now, one of the things I learned, when you got asked questions in the Army, you mumble or you think to give a straight answer. So I figured, well, I got to give a straight answer. Yes, I'm a lawyer. And they said, well, what the you doing here?
He was first stationed at Fort Knox, Kentucky, then transferred overseas to Frankfurt, Germany. Because of his legal background, Francis handled dealings for the Judge Advocate General's Corps. His most significant legal battles, though, lay ahead of him, outside of the military. After the Army, Francis headed back to New Orleans and joined an effort by the U.S. Attorney's Office to integrate federal agencies. With his stellar academic history at Xavier, the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament, the religious order which ran the school, offered Francis the post of Dean of Men. He accepted, but also took a position as an outside counsel with a black law firm representing members of the Congress of Racial Equality, or CORE. Formed in the 1940s, the African American Civil Rights Organization was among the pioneers of nonviolent protest in the United States. Its local members included student activists Oretha Castle and Rudy Lombard. In 1960, they were among 4 students arrested for staging a sit-in to protest segregation at the whites-only lunch counter at McCrory's Five and Dime store on Canal Street.
I went down to Tulane and Broad, and I said, I'm going to get Rudy. If Rudy doesn't finish Xavier, he's not going to Cornell, and he needs to go to Cornell. I go down there, and they send me to where the jailer, where you go downstairs, and the guy, they all call me Dean. They say, Dean, what are you doing here? I said, well, I'm here to get somebody. I said, what? I said, who? I said, I've come to get Rudy Lombard. Oh, I said, Dean, you can't get Rudy Lombard. You got to be a lawyer to be. I said, today is your lucky day. I'm a lawyer. What? He sent for Rudy.
Norman Francis represented his young student as the case known as Lombard versus Louisiana went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. Once overturned, it helped strike down segregation laws and practices across the country. Soon after, in 1961, Lombard and another Corps member approached Francis with a plan for organizing a daring demonstration.
The two of them, I knew them both. They walked into my office. They said, got news for you. I said, yeah, what is the news? Said, we're going to have a freedom ride. Oh, I said, you're out your mind. What? Now, what was the freedom riders? I said, they were testing the, quote, the transportation system in the United States that was still segregated.
Not long after that meeting, 13 black and white civil rights activists began a treacherous bus journey to protest segregation in interstate travel. The plan was to ride from Washington, D.C. to New Orleans. They would use whites-only restrooms, sit in the whites-only areas of restaurants and on buses, occupy seats reserved for whites. They became known as the Freedom Riders. They also became targets of violence. On Mother's Day in 1961, the Freedom Riders were attacked by a white mob in Anniston, Alabama.
That bus got bombed out, and the people who bombed it out made the remark, wherever y'all go, we're going to bomb where they are.
Once again, Rudy Lombard turned to Norman Francis. The threats against the Freedom Riders made it impossible for them to find shelter anywhere in the South. Lombard pleaded with Francis for refuge at Xavier.
You got a whole floor of the dormitory, the men's dormitory, that's empty. I say, yeah, what does that mean? He says, well, we got to have a place for them to stay when they get here to New Orleans.
Helping the Freedom Riders came with risks, but Francis viewed it as a moral decision.
I went into the president, stood none, and I said, here's the recommendation to put at least 12 people up on the floor of the dormitory. And she says, my God. She says, well, what would you do? I said, let me tell you the story. Remember the story about Jesus, where he was born? Didn't have any place to stay? Stayed in that, yeah. Well, here we are.
After the violent attack in Alabama, the Freedom Riders traveled to New Orleans by plane on May 15, 1961. Xavier took them in, giving them rooms on the third floor of St. Michael's Residence Hall.
I did it on one condition. Couldn't have any reporters when they showed up, nothing. They were going to come, and I stood on the porch of the dormitory and watched them come out those cars. They were beaten unmercifully.
Protecting the Freedom Riders solidified Xavier's and Norman Francis's stance on civil rights.
Norman opened the dormitories and said, you can stay here and you'll be safe. That was a big move. That was a risky move for Xavier because it could have borne negative attitudes toward Xavier for housing these rabble-rousers who were, causing all this trouble. I think through Norman Francis, Xavier became a haven for these students who were trying to express themselves in a nonviolent way.
There are things that will happen in your life, and you're going to have to be able to be strong enough to know who you are, and you're going to, well, that was the story of Martin Luther King. He said, you get slapped in the face, turn your head. Yeah. I know a lot of other folks weren't going to turn their head, so he gave the leadership that we're going to run this the right way, and he did.
Francis's social justice work was often less visible than the people he helped.
He was the quiet one behind the scenes that most people don't know how much he was involved in what he did. I mean, he had relationships with Martin Luther King. He knew Jesse Jackson. He knew those folks because they would come down to the city and talk to him about best ways to do things, how to move, relationships in the city. And so he was very much so a part of it, and most people don't know that.
His experience in the civil rights movement in New Orleans convinced Norman Francis that he could make the greatest impact in the educational arena rather than the legal one. It coincided with his ascension at Xavier University. At the age of 37, Francis would make history at Xavier when he was appointed president of the university.
The nuns decided it was time for a lay leader, and he was the perfect one. So he was the first lay president of Xavier University, and that pleased the students tremendously, that one of their own was at the head of the university.
Its earliest roots were educating the African American Catholic population of those that wanted to go to college in New Orleans and in probably southeastern Louisiana. As it evolved, Xavier became a school with a national following. A good deal of it had to do with its reputation as the only Black Catholic institution in the country.
In New Orleans, the crescent city of the South, a few miles from the banks of the fabulous Mississippi, rises the institution through which, for the last 14 years, thousands of students have passed, some to learn the art of making a living, and all to learn the art of building a life.
The institution of Xavier University dates back to 1915, when a college preparatory school opened on the uptown site that was previously home to Southern University. Xavier was established by the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament, the religious order founded by Mother Catherine Drexel. A former socialite from Philadelphia, Mother Drexel would dedicate her life to the education of African and Native Americans.
Her purpose, it was divine, that's the way I can explain that. For me, Xavier was Catherine Drexel, and I was just privileged to be able to be educated by him and then to be asked to be president. Xavier was my life story, but Catherine Drexel was the inspiration.
His connection to Mother Catherine will always be, because it was Norman Francis who received the university as the first lay president from the sisters, and remains tied to the sisters in a way that the sisters will always remember.
Xavier's campus originally consisted of 5 buildings. Under Francis' leadership, a major expansion of the university's physical footprint would take place. In the 1960s, the first permanent residence halls were completed, and the College of Pharmacy was built. The university's pharmacy program eventually became a hallmark of Xavier.
His emphasis was a lot on health, whether it would be the pharmacy school, or whether getting kids in the medical school and the sciences. And HBCUs, there weren't a lot that were focusing on those particular areas at the time he came in. And then he built what I considered to be one of the most distinctive and high quality HBCUs in the country.
The university was growing, and so was the Francis family, which lived on campus.
We grew up in the 60s on a college campus, which was pretty wild and crazy, and saw a lot of things that I bet a lot of my peers didn't see. It truly was a multicultural experience. I mean, there were white nuns, black students, white priests.
For myself, it was a lot of fun. We got to roam across a campus where we got to watch the fraternities. We got to watch Xavier basketball games. We went to stomp shows. There was wide open spaces where we could play and enjoy ourselves. My mother would just come outside and basically kind of yell from the backyard to come home, to come inside to eat.
My mother was the one that went to pick up the check at Xavier, She went to the bank, she would deposit it, she would put them in, the accounts they need to be in. So she basically ran the checkbook, she did the groceries, she ran the entire household, and really was the one that reprimanded us. So if she had to bring my father in, then we knew somebody was in trouble. Because for the most part, she handled everything to allow my dad to do it.
They had 6 kids. They lived on campus. So while they had 6 kids, they had 1,000 kids. Because I remember when we'd visit their home, there were always college students at the house, sitting at the table, eating, whether we were eating dinner or lunch or a snack. I mean, it was truly a vortex of activity. The Francis kitchen, the Francis home was just it was as though it was a part of the campus in an exciting way.
The Francis and Morial families formed a bond that would touch many aspects of New Orleans community and culture. It was a relationship forged when Norman Francis was breaking barriers at Loyola Law School. At the same time, Ernest Dutch Morial became the first African American to earn a law degree from Louisiana State University.
The relationship between my husband, Dutch Morial, and Norman Francis was they're coming together with the same goals, a progress for African Americans, a progress for our community. And in their own ways and in their own spheres, they made things happen. They were courageous. They had integrity. They could bring people along.
While Norman Francis was putting his mark on Xavier, Dutch Morial worked as a lawyer to dismantle segregation. His time as president of the New Orleans NAACP was the beginning of a career that led to City Hall as New Orleans' first black mayor. As both men rose in prominence, their influence on New Orleans grew. So when local businessman Dave Dixon launched an effort to lobby the National Football League to establish a franchise in New Orleans, he asked Norman Francis and Dutch Morial for help.
Dave Dixon could sell matches in hell.
When my father started the effort to bring a team to New Orleans, which became the Saints, the first thing that they did is Dad established a company called the Pro Football Club Incorporated. He started bringing in people from around the community to be members of that. And Dr. Norman Francis and Dutch Morial and others like that in the black community were involved in it.
In 1962, that collective went on a campaign to show the NFL New Orleans had a strong enough fan base to support a team. It secured a doubleheader exhibition game in 1963. All it needed was a massive turnout from every part of New Orleans.
They needed Dutch and Norman Francis because they needed the reach into the black community. And they were extremely well known and well respected. And they knew how to get the word out to the public to come to the games and to buy tickets for the games and support the team. And so that was why. We had to prove to the NFL that we would financially support a team.
The venue for the doubleheader was Tulane University's stadium. Francis and Morial drummed up support from the local black community. At the ticket counter, there was a sense of excitement and possibility.
Now you have to understand, this is going to be the first major integrated event, sporting event, in New Orleans. And the reason is because Tulane was a private institution. And because it was a private institution, they had the right to set their own standards. People would come up to the window and ask for a seat, and they wanted certain sections or whatever. And the first black man that came up to the window to ask for tickets, he said, I want to buy 4 tickets. And they said, well, where would you like to have them? And he said, well, where can I sit? And they said, anywhere.
On September 7th, 1963, 57,000 fans, black and white, packed Tulane Stadium for the double feature. New Orleans left little doubt that it could support a professional football franchise. 3 years after the exhibition games, the New Orleans Saints were founded on November 1st, 1966. Norman Francis and C.C. Dejoie Jr., an owner of the Louisiana Weekly newspaper, were early investors in the team.
This was pretty significant that in 1967, there were 2 black investors in the New Orleans Saints football franchise.
The New Orleans Saints may have struggled competitively for decades, but the team built a religious following. Faithful fans were rewarded in 2010 when the Saints finally won a Super Bowl championship. It was the culmination of true teamwork decades earlier.
It's quite possible we might not have had the Saints without the support of the black community. We might never have had the Saints. That would have been a crime. Because it's such a unifying spiritual effect on this city. No matter who was the owner, if you hadn't had the support of the black community, it would have been much more difficult to have the Saints here. To financially justify it to the NFL owners. Because the NFL owners were businessmen, and like a lot of people are, and they want to see the bottom line work. And without the support of the black community, without Norman Francis and Dutch Morial, we might not have ever had the Saints.
Entering the 1970s, Norman Francis was still in his 30s and still in his early years as Xavier University president. His reputation as a protector of civil rights was firmly established, and he would advance black causes in another way.
I was involved in the civil rights days as well.
Alden McDonald first met Dr. Francis when he was a student at Xavier, and Francis was Dean of Men. McDonald eventually became the first African American to be hired by a Louisiana bank, but was working in relative obscurity at International City Bank in New Orleans. Francis aggressively lobbied the then 29-year-old McDonald to join him and establish a black-owned bank in New Orleans.
I remember the day he last approached me to come join the bank. It was before the bank opened, and I turned him down several times, and he came back to my office, and he said, "I'm back here again to ask you the same question, and I'm not leaving with a no answer."
From a simple trailer on Tulane Avenue, Liberty Bank and Trust Company was chartered in 1972. McDonald was the bank's president. He and Francis would lead it for 5 decades. Liberty Bank focused on providing underserved people financial pathways to starting businesses, home ownership, and lending opportunities they couldn't find at other institutions. After conceiving the idea of a black and locally owned bank, Francis was able to watch it grow alongside the community it was aiming to uplift.
It was his vision to start this bank, and that's over 50 years ago.
Ready to call the meeting?
He's been heavily involved in the bank and has been providing leadership to this institution with other leaders that's been part of the board members of Liberty Bank for the past 50 years.
He was very giving, sharing, and committed to allowing people to experience different things that he experienced on a daily basis that would be instrumental in allowing people to have access to these opportunities and experiences.
By the 1980s, Xavier's campus was expanding, and Norman Francis was approaching his 2nd decade as the university's president. It was in the 80s that Xavier saw an influx of students majoring in the sciences, doubling enrollment at the university. To accommodate that surge in students, a science complex was constructed and named in honor of Dr. Francis. But perhaps the university's defining moment of that era was when the Xavier community hosted one of the most beloved leaders in world history. In September 1987, Pope John Paul II spent 3 days visiting various sites in New Orleans, each one representing a unique aspect of the city's culture, Catholic or otherwise. One of the final stops on that papal tour was Xavier University, When the pontiff arrived at the campus in New Orleans' Gerttown neighborhood, Dr. Francis served as host. A devout Catholic, Francis was awestruck, but that didn't prevent a very human moment between the two.
The lights were at the top, and when that white robe hit there, it's like electricity went through me. I'm standing next to the Pope, and I'm telling the Pope, don't walk on the grass, walk over here. And there was a spot that we could go there and then get to the stage. And my daughter was watching it. She said, what were you telling the Pope? I just said, don't walk on the grass.
Pope John Paul II departed New Orleans, and Xavier was about to enter a period of historic growth. In 1990, Xavier's South Campus was opened on what was then Jefferson Davis Parkway. 3 years later, an addition to the College of Pharmacy and the completion of the Library Resources Center gave Xavier's growing campus a distinct look. Because of the green roofs on certain buildings, it was nicknamed the Emerald City, not to be confused with another place of the same name.
I won't use the Emerald City from Wizard of Oz, because the wizard was not real. Norman Francis was real. And in the sense that as, clearly mayor if you wish to, but basically as leader of Xavier, as someone who kept identity and mission, focused on identity, mission, and purpose for whomever came and those who would come after him.
Xavier's identity increasingly was linked to the African American students it was sending to medical school. In the 90s, the university began leading the nation in the number of black students who went on to complete medical school. It was the result of Dr. Francis investing in a pre-med program 20 years prior and identifying the talent of retired chemistry professor J.W. Carmichael to lead it.
What Norman Francis understood early on is that small colleges, small universities needed a niche. They needed to find a lane that they could be dominant in. He found that lane. That lane was in the sciences. That lane was in pre-med.
At one time, he was sending more African Americans to medical schools than any other university in the country. And that may be the case today. The graduates of the pharmacy program are all over the country and very well respected. That's why I admired him, how he took something and made it into something very special.
These successes on campus required support on the home front. The demands on Dr. Francis often meant time away from his wife and their 6 children. Blanche Francis made sure their life had balance.
I don't want to get used to the idea of him going away. Because I think if I get used to the idea of him being away, there's no sense in having him around. So I still would like to have him home more. But I know, and when I see the results of what he does when he goes on these trips, that makes it so much worthwhile.
With 6 kids, the fascinating thing was, as busy as my dad was, there was never a wait till your dad gets home, he's going to handle this. My mom handled it.
Let's talk about a bigger picture of balancing 2 extraordinary lives with 6 children and doing everything that you do. How do you do it every day?
Oh, I think Blanche can answer that.
Habit. Just plain habit. You just get up. You decide I got to get up in the morning at 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock or whatever, and you stop.
5:30 every morning to walk.
And you stop fighting it, and you just get up and do it. You say, I've got to do it, so you just, if you fight it, then you're miserable for the rest of the day. So what do?
Exactly
You just
right.
get up and you do it, and that's it.
Well, you know, the amazing part about that, and that's a question I'm sure that's asked a lot of times, but we all, many people in this room, and we said it came from families where this was natural. You didn't think twice about it. Exactly. You were part of a family that helped each other. There were responsibilities you had. You did them. And I never thought about it any other way, and I'm sure Blanche never thought about it any other way. So when people ask us these questions, it's hard to answer, except it comes naturally.
Xavier University entered the 21st century on a high note. In 2000, its foundress was canonized. Saint Catherine Drexel became the patron saint of racial justice and philanthropist. Xavier also reached an all-time high in student enrollment, 4,100 students, 3 times the student body when Dr. Francis became president. But on August 29, 2005, the university and much of southeast Louisiana would suffer like never before. Hurricane Katrina killed more than 1,800 people and overwhelmed the levees protecting New Orleans. At Xavier, floodwaters took control. For more than 2 weeks, virtually every aspect of campus life was underwater. Students, faculty, and staff were scattered throughout the country. The university's future was unclear.
We knew we had been hurt, and my personal reaction was, I just felt that shouldn't have happened, but I couldn't do anything about it. But the one thing I thought I could do was to get back as fast as we could.
Dr. Francis set an ambitious schedule to bring back students and faculty and to reopen the campus. He shared his timeline with the federal official who visited Xavier during the early rebuilding stage in 2005.
He said, well, when are you coming back? This was December. I said, I'll be back on January the 17th. He said, what's that? I said, that's the registration for the second semester.
Like so many times before, Norman Francis had a vision and was determined to reopen the campus despite overwhelming odds and a $90 million price tag.
I never thought about what it was going to cost. All I knew was it had to be done and somehow we're going to pay for it.
Remarkably, when Xavier reopened in January of 2006, about 75% of its student body returned. Dr. Francis's peers give him much of the credit.
You have to tell people what you're really facing and at the same time give them hope that there's pathways. So I think his communications, not just necessarily, emails and so on, but how he talked about New Orleans and how he talked about Xavier, how he talked, which I've heard him talk about silver linings. He may not have used that expression, but that's what he was talking about.
While Norman Francis was leading Xavier's recovery, Governor Kathleen Blanco tapped him to oversee one of the most extensive rebuilding missions in the world. Dr. Francis was named co-chair of the Louisiana Recovery Authority, the state agency created after Hurricanes Katrina and Rita. His was a much-needed voice at the time.
One day we were having a Louisiana Recovery Authority meeting, and oddly enough, things were getting a little bit angry. People were marching into the meeting talking about the right of return and where we're going to be building houses. And Norman turned to me and he said, I've got to go to the bathroom. I said, Norman, no, please, don't go to the bathroom. Don't leave me because I would have to chair the meeting. He said, no, I got to go. And he left, and as soon as he left the room, you could feel the tension starting to rise. And I said, somebody go find Dr. Francis. I need him badly. And when he came back, he was able to calm everything down again.
Dr. Norman Francis's leadership during the recovery caught the eye of people around the country, including President George W. Bush.
The United States honors Norman C. Francis for his leadership, compassion, and commitment to education.
On December 16, 2006, Dr. Norman Francis was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
Well, that was a big surprise.
Considered the nation's highest civilian honor, the Presidential Medal of Freedom is presented to individuals who made significant contributions in areas such as world peace, cultural, and scientific endeavors. The White House highlighted Dr. Francis's dedication to equality and education as Xavier's president. It also called his role as the chairman of the Louisiana Recovery Authority vital.
And I always think, there's that country boy that he would occasionally refer to himself as, and here he is with the president and all these other folks on stage whose, most of them's names I recognize that I hadn't necessarily thought of my dad in that same realm, but we were there too.
Wow, I remember being there and being so proud
of him, because he continued on for another several years, that it was a culmination of all the things that he had done and the acknowledgement of a man who just sort of put his head down and said, we're going to do, for our community, for our people, everything, and put everything I have into it, and for it to be acknowledged at that level was pretty amazing.
Amazing is a word often used to describe Norman Francis and his tenure at Xavier University. In 2015, he decided it was time for the institution he had served for nearly 50 years to forge a new path with new leadership.
You just got to know when it's time to go.
In May of that year, while attending his final commencement as Xavier's president, Dr. Francis once again heard admirers speak of his impact, not just on the campus, but across the country.
I want to thank Dr. Francis, this American hero, this American icon, and he's an American treasure. Let's give it up for Dr. Francis.
I've known many leaders. I've served with many presidents. I'm proud to serve and have served with President Barack Obama, but I can tell you that there are few leaders, and he may be the best I have ever known, in his steadfast commitment to you, to the young people of our nation. He has stood against the tide, through the raging storms, to lead our university and our city. I don't know where New Orleans would be without Xavier University and his leadership for 60 years.
As the leader of this great institution for almost half a century, and as a national figure for almost as long, he has helped to build Xavier, helped to rebuild New Orleans, and helped to make our nation more fair and more just.
There was an emotional reason retirement in 2015 felt right for Dr. Francis. His wife, Blanche, was in failing health. Just months after his retirement, Mrs. Francis passed away. The couple had been married 60 years.
She ran the household and all of the things surrounding that, our lives, my dad's life. There's no way he could have achieved and done all that he did accomplish and has accomplished without that partnership and that alignment.
I wouldn't be sitting here today if I hadn't married her. She would tell you what she thought about you today and love you tomorrow.
These monuments will come down.
In the spring of 2017, the city of New Orleans began removing Confederate monuments around the city. 2 years earlier, Mayor Mitch Landrieu urged the city council to take down what many considered symbols of oppression. It was in response to the 2015 racially motivated massacre at a black church in Charleston, South Carolina. Even in a majority black city, the process divided the community. The removal of certain monuments, like the statue of former Confederate President Jefferson Davis, had to be conducted in the middle of the night to help ensure safety for contractors.
Black Lives Matter!
In New Orleans and across the United States, calls for social justice grew louder in 2020, following the murder of George Floyd. 3 years after statues of the Confederacy came down, the New Orleans City Council proposed changing certain street names. The first street on the list would be Jefferson Davis Parkway. The council voted unanimously to rename it Norman C. Francis Parkway. It seemed predestined.
It's that the people of the city had already chosen. They'd already chosen what was the appropriate name for this street. Everybody knew it.
On January 29, 2021, Dr. Francis cut the ribbon on the parkway named in his honor, a street that once commemorated the Confederate president who sought to divide the country, now carries the name of a university president who sought to unite people throughout a life of service. Perhaps fittingly, the Norman C. Francis Parkway intersects with Drexel Drive, forming a cross.
The symbolism of it, to me, is the intersection of Drexel and Norman C. Francis Parkway. You've got the foundress and the young man who they handed the keys to. forever connected in a physical way in that sense. That's the most significant thing for me.
During some of the most significant moments of New Orleans and Louisiana history, Dr. Norman C. Francis was always there to guide people with kindness. It is a legacy of leadership.
My style was, I believe everybody was somebody and everybody was important.
That's the way he's always lived, whether it was at Xavier University, whether it was some board or commission that he served on. He was a true leader, and he led the organization in the right direction.
He not only is the nicest person I know, but he has the magical quality of making everybody around him nice.
He's touched many students, and each of those students will credit him in some measure for who they became.
He's the finest man I've ever met. And I'd want him to know that. And know, as I said, it changed my life both personally and professionally. He was a model of a community leader, university leader, and that's why he's always been a mentor. There's no better leader than I ever saw than him.
Major support for Dr. Norman C. Francis, A Legacy of Leadership, was provided in association with Just Films, Ford Foundation, supporting documentary film, public media, and freedom of expression to tell the stories that reflect the diverse perspectives and experiences of our world today. The Ford Foundation. Learn more.
Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Louisiana. The strength of the cross, the protection of the shield, and thousands of Louisiana doctors. The right card, the right care.
Liberty Bank, celebrating 50 years of building generational wealth. Mortgages, business loans, Visa credit, financial freedom. Mr. and Mrs. Charles W. Goodyear, proud supporters of quality educational television in New Orleans. Additional funding comes from Dillard University, cultivating leaders who act courageously to make the world a better place. Loyola University New Orleans, proud to sponsor this documentary about the incredible legacy of Norman Francis, the first black graduate of Loyola College of Law, and an embodiment of our commitment to education, justice, and service to the community. New South Parking, proudly honoring the legacy of a true leader, Dr. Norman C. Francis. Operation Restoration supports women and girls impacted by incarceration to recognize their full potential, restore their lives, and discover new possibilities. Velo Charitable Trust, supporting this documentary with love and admiration from Angela Velo and Jim Basker. Xavier University of Louisiana, whose ultimate purpose is to contribute to the promotion of a more just and humane society by preparing its students to assume roles of leadership and service in a global society. And by Delgado Community College, serving the New Orleans region since 1921. And Tulane, sparking innovation, pioneering research, transforming teaching, opportunity, and diversity. And from these additional contributors, and by the WYES Producer Circle, a group of generous contributors dedicated to the support of WYES local productions.